this afternoon we've got a real treat. It's a tremendous privilege for me to be here and introduce our next guest. So will you please join me? I want to give a great big welcome to one of the finest performing artists of his generation, a star of the stage, the motion picture screen, television. He's been a producer and a director. Please give a warm welcome to LeVar Burton. Well, welcome to Seattle.
Thank you, sir.
It's good to have you here. This is not your first time here at Casual Connect.
No, I was here last year.
Cool.
I sort of just cruised through.
Incognito. Did you get stopped in the street?
Yeah, but it's all good.
Yesterday we were walking over to get a bite, and he got stopped in the street, and most graciously stopped to sign autographs and talk to people and so on. And I thought, well, that's a classy guy. Not everybody from Hollywood would behave that way.
I actually like contact with the fans, and cool. I have, I guess I'm lucky in that LeVar Burton fans tend to be nice people. It's not like I'm Gary Busey and my fans want to put cigarettes out on my arm or something like that.
Now, I'm sure a huge number of people in the audience are Star Trek fans. If you're out there, Star Trek fans, raise your hands.
Wow.
There you go, look at that. A whole lot of Star Trek fans, of course. And so, LeVar,
raise your hand if Geordi is your favorite character. Yeah. You're so lying. We know it's Data.
So we're certainly going to chat about that. We're going to talk a little bit about his experience there. But I thought to put this conversation in context, what we should talk about a little bit at the outset is this grand arc. You know, LeVar's career, in my view, starts in 1977 with Roots, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the experiences he's had along the way, but I also want to talk about the big transition that's happening in the media industry, because the events in television, the events that are happening now in motion pictures, and of course the music business, those are not disconnected from the events that we're talking about here, this great big shift towards mobile, social, local, interactivity, and gaming. And so that's kind of our big frame for today's conversation.
Cool.
What attracted you to Casual Connect? I'm so curious.
Well, I've been a gamer for a long time.
Cool.
I started playing games with my daughter, who just turned 17 last week, when she was a kid. I mean, going back to CD-ROM games.
Wow.
And
so she grew up with the medium.
She grew up with the medium. I've gone through every game system with her. We used to really bond playing Lara Croft.
Cool.
I mean, I still have my Sega Dreamcast. Wish there were more games for it, but alas, no. All the way up to, you know, today, playing, you know, Halo with her, or, you know.
That's pretty serious game action.
Yeah, she's a gamer. You know what? And I love it because women come up to me all the time and say that Star Trek, The Next Generation, was one of the things that they did with their fathers. And I love that story because for me, I have bonded with my daughter through gaming throughout the course of her life. And I certainly appreciate that there's something that I'm involved in that has served as that sort of bonding mechanism for other daughters and fathers. And you know, whatever that is, I think it's a good thing. It certainly has saved my relationship with my daughter.
It's a fun thing to do, right? They talk about games as a social lubricant, but often for dads, I have a daughter your daughter's age as well, and often for dads, it's a little tough to figure out, like, how do I connect with my daughter?
Absolutely. And
there's certainly periods when they're growing up, there's times where they don't really want to have a lot to do with their dads. Other times they do. Games are a great way to do it, right? It's like this sort of neutral meeting ground where you can say, okay, cool, we're not going to talk, we're not going to try to do homework, we're going to just hang out together and do this.
No matter what phase Mika has been going through in her life, we've always been able to connect over gaming.
Cool.
So it's really been a constant for us, and as I say, a saving grace, because she's certainly at an age in her life right now where, you know, the only thing I tend to do is bug the crap out of her, you know.
But the special hell for daddies that's out there, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So let's take everything back to the beginning. Let's go back to 1977. So you had this opportunity to audition for Roots. This was really your very first audition.
Yeah, I was a sophomore at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles studying theater. with an intention to move to New York and to hustle my way onto the Broadway stage. That was my goal. As a sophomore, they were casting for what they were calling a miniseries. How many people remember were alive during the heyday of the miniseries? How many people actually saw Roots?
Yeah, how many people saw Roots?
Yeah.
Wow.
How many people read the book? Right.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a powerful medium, television. You know?
And then how did you go to the audition? You get invited to the audition? And what was the inspiration there? You hanging around with your buddies and you're like, I'm going to go for that.
They had done a casting process that had lasted a couple of months. They had been to New York and Chicago. They had seen everyone in LA who had an agent, and they were just casting the net wider. They called the drama schools at Cal Arts and UCLA, and I was at USC. So it was just, I was in the right place at the right time.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And so you got the role, and the idea was to produce a mini-series. How long did that last? How long was that production? Did you have to drop out of school, and did you just decide to pursue this, or did you stay in?
We shot in April, May, June, and July of 1976, and I took a leave of absence from SC as I missed the last term, the last semester. And my intention, and I went and re-enrolled in the following year, but in January, Roots aired. Before that, they put me on a press tour. So I missed another term of school, and then Roots sort of blew up.
Yeah.
And I never looked back.
Well, it's really quite a cultural moment, right? For the folks who, I know some people, it's 1977, it's like talking about the Victorian era, the primordial past. I was a kid in Cleveland, Ohio, and I remember when this thing hit because it was the talk of the town. In those days, Cleveland was a city with people from all over the world. You know, like Eastern Europe, we had Croatians and Polish people and Ukrainians and Czechoslovakians, and they all didn't get along. But I remember when this TV show hit, it was like super controversial.
Yes.
Because the African-American experience hadn't really ever been dramatized that way, and some people felt it was un-American to show that particular perspective. So it generated some controversy. Were you experiencing any of that?
There was quite a bit. In fact, ABC, Roots was originally aired on the ABC television network. ABC brought one of the other actors, a terrific guy, he's passed now, Vic Morrow. From my childhood, I knew him. He used to be on a show called Combat when I was a kid. None of you were alive then. And Vic played the overseer, the plantation overseer in Roots, the man who was responsible for whipping Kunta Kinte. And in that moment where Kunta finally submits to saying his new name, the name that they've given him,
Toby, right?
Which was Toby. ABC brought Vic and I to New York and put us both on Good Morning America next to each other so that America could see that there was no animus between us, that we were actors playing roles. There was a lot of unrest, even violence, in various parts of the country, on school playgrounds. There were arguments, if not actual fisticuffs.
Well, of course, the background here is desegregation was in full swing. You had busing going on, riots in Boston and other cities in Cleveland. They had, police militarized the courthouse because of the busing ruling. So, yeah, there was a tremendous amount of tension there, which is why I think Alex Haley was a genius to come up with this book, but also to get the thing on television at that time, because he started a national dialogue.
He did. It absolutely started a national dialogue, and it's a moment in television history which can probably never be repeated again because we don't watch television in the same way any longer.
It's true.
When Roots aired, it was the national conversation. The audience grew almost exponentially every night. It's interesting that Roots was aired originally in 8 consecutive nights of programming, which was revolutionary. It had never been done before. The novel for television, the miniseries, was in its nascent stages. Rich Man, Poor Man, the Irwin Shaw book, had been broadcast in weekly installments. But ABC, the network, and the producers, they thought they had something that was pretty remarkable. Although, as the producer of Roots, Stan Margulies, used to like to say, in a country that is 80% white and 20% black, how would America respond to a multi-hour program where the whites were the villains and the blacks were the heroes? They just didn't No, there was no way of knowing how it would, as they say, play in Poughkeepsie. And so the decision was, well, let's not put this on in weekly installments, let's put it all on at the same time.
Wow.
Because if it tanks,
oh, they can get rid of it.
it's over in a week.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Every night, the audience grew. The final episode of Roots is still, I think, number 3 in the most watched episode of television in the history of the medium.
Yeah.
Because and then it sparked a whole other cottage industry about genealogy and searching for your own roots. The word roots became, rooted in our lexicon.
It became a concept for everybody.
That's right, because of the book and the miniseries. So it really was a social phenomenon, which is only possible by being able to focus a great number of eyeballs on a thing simultaneously.
And the controversy helped because it gave it some buzz. I don't think that's how people thought necessarily in those days, but nowadays, if you were a producer or a programmer,
you'd want that kind of controversy.
You'd be looking for that, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, you'd want people in the streets fighting. Yeah.
And just to put it in perspective, in those days, in the late 70s, during primetime television, 90% of the televisions in America were tuned in to the 3 big broadcast networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. So it wasn't like today where you've got 500 channels on satellite television to choose from. Really, 3 channels. So one network that was brave enough to bring this message forth could actually set the agenda for the whole country. That was a powerful thing. I recall really clearly when I was at MTV in the mid-1980s, when I was starting out my career, the only black performers we put on MTV were Michael Jackson. We were afraid of rap, and I'll tell you, no radio station in 1985 was playing rap music. Right. So there was this really strange moment, and when you look back in history, it wasn't such a long period of time ago, where this culture couldn't accept black culture, right? They were 2 separate things. Now, MTV did a great deal to bring that in. We brought in Yo MTV Raps and started to break black music on TV. But even as late as 1987, that was a controversial discussion to be having. And that's a full 10 years after Roots aired on national TV.
Rob, there is a direct link, a thread that runs from the reconstruction of the South post-Civil War through the 60s and the Civil Rights Movement in America, through Roots in the 70s, right up to and including the election of Barack Obama to the presidency of the United States.
Right on.
And in there on that timeline is MTV putting on MTV Raps and being responsible for hip-hop culture.
Yeah, very much so.
Being the lingua franca on the planet now.
Way ahead of radio at that time.
Absolutely.
So this is a theme that's going to go on through this conversation today. As LeVar and I have gotten to know each other, we've been talking about how pop culture, whether it's a game or TV show or motion picture, is a reflection of a society. And there's a kind of dialogue that goes back and forth because we make these pop culture shows, these acts, these performances that tell us something about ourselves. And so we discover our identity in the media that we consume. But I think at this moment, your first professional acting moment as a kind of the Kickstarter, right, for this gigantic conversation, and as you say, triggered a movement that enabled everybody to go out and claim their roots or find their roots or figure out where they're from, what country they were from, and so forth. Okay, so after Roots is done, now you're like a superstar, and you're how old, 18, 19 years old?
19.
And a whole series of movie offers come in, right? So you're doing a movie just about every year after that. Wow.
Yeah.
And you did the Jim Jones movie, you did
a string of TV movies, One in a Million, the Ron LaFleur story.
Ron LaFleur, exactly,
Dummy, The Guy in a Tragedy, the Jim Jones story.
And then in 1986, Gene Roddenberry comes to you. So tell me about that. What did he say? How did he approach you? How did that happen?
Well, I'm a firm believer, Rob, in the belief in the adage that everything happens for a reason. And that there is no capricious energy in the universe. It's all fairly purposeful, as far as I can tell. I did a very bad TV movie in the early 80s called Emergency Room. And one of the producers on that bad TV movie was a man named Robert H. Justman. Now, I'm a huge science fiction fan. Watched Star Trek when I was a kid, the original series. So I knew that Robert H. Justman was an associate producer on Star Trek. And I would pump him every day for stories about how the series was made. Flash forward, years later, Bob is working with Gene at Paramount on The Next Generation, and he remembered my love for Trek and gave me a call and said, we're mounting a new Star Trek. I know you really loved the show. Would you be interested? And I was like, who do I have to kill?
That's great.
You know?
That's cool. And at that time, you were much more well-known than
Yes.
Patrick Stewart, right?
Right.
In terms of like the star value there,
Right.
you were a great get for them.
Well, and they didn't want anyone that had any sort of a high profile. They wanted to invent characters, you know, with actors that no one knew so they could, you know, start with a fresh, clean slate.
But Star Trek had been kind of mothballed. I mean, it wasn't considered a success in the 60s when it
No,
aired. They
not
took
at
it
all.
off the air, but the thing was like a cockroach. You couldn't kill it. It kept coming back to life, right? And
That's
so
right.
there was in the, you know, I guess somebody at Paramount was there looking through the archive going, you know, we got this show that just keeps turning up like a bad penny. What do we do with it? So how did they, what was the idea? Like, what was the idea of Next Generation? What got them motivated to get that started again?
As is often the case in big business, it was a financial incentive. Star Trek: The Motion Picture did surprisingly well.
Oh, that's why. Oh,
right?
So then they said, let's make a show.
Yeah, and the second movie did well, and then they made The Search for Spock, and then The Voyage Home, and they were it was clicking. They were like, oh my God, we have a cash cow here, and where else can we exploit, you know, this title? And so they turned to television.
Shatner and Nimoy, they were kind of going over the hill. It's
Right.
time to bring in a new generation.
Exactly right. And first run syndication, an hour-long television show that is not on a network, but an ad hoc network of stations that all agree to air the programming at roughly the same time on their independent stations. That idea had never been done before. First run syndication was born with Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Wow. Oh, I see. Okay, so there's another piece of our big media puzzle here is the movement from broadcast to syndication.
Yep.
So what was it like working with Gene Roddenberry? How old was he at that time?
He was at the end of his life when we first started working on Star Trek. Gene had already turned 70, but he was still the great bird of the galaxy. I mean, he was remarkable.
And rigorous about his story world, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, kind of a privilege, right, to have an opportunity to work with someone like that. People in the TV industry weren't so aware of this. It was sort of a secret, I guess. But I know the fans of the show are very well aware of this, that there's a story Bible behind the world of Star Trek, and writers have to very scrupulously observe that story Bible, and that's the work of Gene Roddenberry.
That's right.
So he, like all great storytellers, he created this giant fictional universe, and the stories he told, well, those were just episodes or one glimpse into that universe, but the universe is much larger than the stories he was able to tell.
And the universe had rules.
Yeah.
Right? And those rules had to be observed and followed. I was a huge fan of Gene Roddenberry's. As I say, I watched the show when I was a kid. There weren't, and for me, being a lover of science fiction, literature as well as science fiction in the popular culture, it wasn't all that often that I was able to encounter heroes in the pages of those science fiction novels I read who looked like me.
Right.
Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was one that I completely was able to embrace because, in part, it said, when the future comes, there's a place for you.
You're able to be multicultural.
Seeing Nichelle Nichols on the bridge of the Enterprise sent a major message to me, and that was, you know, really critical. I mean, I grew up in an era where television really dominated the popular culture. It's not so much the truth anymore, you know, but in the 60s and 70s, television was the dominator in popular culture, and it was, and in the formation of one's own identity and self-image, how you see yourself represented in the popular culture is incredibly important. It's so much different for my kids these days, who see themselves represented in the popular culture every day, everywhere.
Yeah, that's
magazines, true. On television,
True.
movies. It was rare. It was like a special deal. We would all call each other when black people were on television.
Think
when I was
about
a
Bill
kid.
Cosby, and maybe you've got Sanford and Son, not a handful of shows in the 70s before Roots took place where the central protagonist was an African American.
And never in a drama. It had never succeeded in a drama before.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And of course, Geordie LaFarge was also differently abled because he was a blind character.
And so to have grown up and become a part of that family, part of that mythos, and represent for physically challenged folks what Lieutenant Uhuru meant to me, I can't even tell you how it feels to have become a part of this family, having been a fan first. It's beyond.
So everybody in the audience wants to know the answer to one question. They want to know, what was it like to look through that visor?
I should have brought it. I should have brought it to show you. The visor is actually, I couldn't see through it, which was weird.
So they really did make you blind.
Yeah, which was kind of strange because I played a guy who, when he put the visor on, saw more than everybody else around him. Yet when the actor put the device on, he couldn't see anything at all.
So that's 1986.
Yep.
But then a whole series of films as well came out after the seasons of the show. So you were on films from the mid '90s all the way through to fairly recently, right?
Yeah.
I think there were 4, maybe 5.
I think we did 5. I think 5.
Amazing.
5.
So and what a lot of people don't know about you is that you were also a director of Star Trek, and in fact, you directed more episodes than any other cast member. So in a way, you were kind of carrying the flame for kind of carrying the torch forward for Gene Roddenberry to carry on his franchise, maybe in his honor or in his carry forth his idea.
You know, I really have. I feel like I have developed over the course of the last 30 years of my life and career to a place where I feel comfortable calling myself a storyteller.
Yeah.
That's my job as I see it, whether I'm directing or writing, acting, producing, whatever it is I do, I approach it from the identity as storyteller. And having been able to really learn from some of the best, in the business, men like Gene Roddenberry, Alex Haley, I mean, a master storyteller, Alex Haley was. Gene was a master storyteller. It's really been obvious to me that there is some sort of, I like to say, intelligence that keeps impelling me in a certain direction, to communicate, to use those skills to reach people, and it keeps happening again and again in my life.
Tell us about the difference between being an actor in front of the camera and being a director behind the camera. So suddenly you had this new responsibility. It's a great opportunity, of course, but it's a new set of responsibilities. Was that a big change for you?
It is.
What's different? What's different between being an actor and being a director?
Well, acting is my first love. However, I have to say that it's a fairly selfish pursuit. An actor gets a script and he goes through it and he says, bullshit, bullshit. Oh, there's my line. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Oh, another line from me. That's good. That's nice. A nice big speech. A director, it's so true. A director is responsible for the whole vision, right? And has to keep all of the different departments in mind. Because, see, here's the great thing about motion pictures and sound, whether it's on television or in a movie or online or in a game. Motion pictures and sound are pretty much the most powerful delivery system for an emotional experience to human beings. That's just the way we're hardwired.
Yeah.
When you read a book, you make the movie in your head, which is one of the reasons why I've always been drawn to literature and the written word. But when you're making content, you have an opportunity to tell that story through so many different lenses. Through the actor's lens, through the writer's lens, through the director's lens, through the art director's lens, through the property man's lens. Right. Everybody tells the story through their own particular area of expertise, right? And as a director, you get to take credit for everybody else's work.
But they're all looking to you for direction, literally,
which you have to be able to give. You have to be able to make a decision. You have to know what you want. You have to be...
I mean, it's exhausting. You're just making decisions from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed at night.
It's exhilarating. It's the perfect job for a control freak. It absolutely is.
So you have to have this total picture in mind, where an actor gets to kind of go isolated, zero right into the particular character he's going to create, maybe channel through himself.
Right.
But the director has to see how that piece is going to fit. It's almost like conducting an orchestra.
It is.
And you've got to make sure all the people behind the scenes are doing their part to move stuff around and make all the pictures happen.
Directing is as much a job about leadership as it is about vision, because you really have to get an army to all move in the same direction with the same purpose and intent, and be able to marshal all of those individual personalities into a buy-in for a common outcome.
Now, at least when you're a director, you've got the camera set up, the set is there. Generally, nowadays we shoot everything on blue screen or green screen, but back in the day there were real sets, hard sets. So there's a ton of work to get all that in place, but then at least you get to see the scene play out.
Right.
Imagine now the game designers in this audience, they are, in a way, the directors of their games.
Absolutely.
But this process is one of the most difficult ones in the world to envision because they don't really get to see the benefit of their work until software developers have written game software, platforms, and so forth. So you might be far removed from that. You don't get that instantaneous feedback about how your performance is working out. So it's a different cycle. But you can imagine that that role, I think, is similar in some respects to being a director because you have to conjure the whole thing up in its totality in your head, and then you've got to communicate that vision to each person working on the crew. What ways do you use to communicate? How do you communicate to people? Like, what are your tips, your leadership tips as a director?
As a director, I always make it a point to plant a flag, right? To make it, because communication is absolutely key. I believe that on a movie set, the quality of our efforts is determined by the quality of our communication. So I'm always giving information. I'm always trying to plant a flag so that everybody knows where we're headed, right? I believe very firmly that if you create an environment where people are comfortable contributing their best efforts, they will. And I believe if you treat people with respect and tell them they're doing a good job when they are, and if you feed them well, right?
There you go.
The crew will follow you to the ends of the earth. If they see that you are engaged and enthusiastic about what you are doing, and you're just a decent person, and show them that they matter, that they are a part of it, that they are not marginalized or minimized as a part of the process, it's all good.
Because the crew can slow you down if you don't get their buy-in, right?
Man, they can sink you.
They can teach you a good lesson.
Absolutely.
What's the biggest demand you've ever made on a crew? Because sometimes the situation is such that you're going to ask them to work hard, work extra hard. And how did you get that? How did you get them to do that?
Implicitly, I mean, I demand a lot from a crew. I make it clear that I bring my A game every day and that I expect the same from everybody else. But then I bring my A game every day. You know,
right.
you have to, and that's what I mean by leadership. You know, I wouldn't ask anything of anyone that I wasn't willing to bring to the table myself.
So you kind of earn their respect.
Absolutely.
It's like Alexander the Great. You lead from the front.
You lead from the front. That's the only place you can lead from.
Right on.
Yeah, being willing to step out there is what it takes.
So another milestone in your career is, I think in 1983, you started to work with PBS on Reading Rainbow.
Any Reading Rainbow fans in the house?
Right.
Woo! Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high. Woo!
That's great. It lives on. Wow, that's great. Fans.
Yeah.
Right on. So what drew you to Reading Rainbow, of all things?
See, there's been this thread throughout the course of my life. Yeah, my mother was an English teacher, and so in my mom's house, you either read a book or you got hit in the head with one. She really didn't care what your choice was. But you were going to have contact with literature, okay? So my mom not only read to me when I was a kid, she always read in front of me. And to this day, my mother's always got at least 2 or 3 thick novels going for her own enjoyment, right? She likes mysteries and westerns. And so, but like I said before, I'm a child of the television age. And after Roots, I saw how this piece of television, dramatic television, changed the consciousness of a nation.
Yeah.
It literally did. The story of slavery in America had never been told from the point of view of the Africans before.
Right.
And you know, a lot of people forget that the title of the novel, Roots, is Roots, the Saga of an American Family. Yeah. Slavery in America is our common story, whether you're black or white. It's just, you can't tell the story of America without telling that story. And when I was growing up, slavery was always referred to in terms of its economic impact. It was never discussed in terms of the human cost, the human impact. But watching a nation's consciousness sort of shift through the power of the medium of television really got my attention. When I was presented with this idea to use the medium of television with an audience of children, to steer them back in the direction of literature and the written word, it was like, I'm in.
Cool.
I'm in. I love that idea.
Cool.
And
it clearly worked. Clearly connected with some people.
Right? And for 25 years, we were able to do that regularly with American children. And so for a lot of the people, you know, in this audience, they grew up with Reading Rainbow, and they grew up with LeVar as sort of a part of their lives. And now that they're older and beginning to contemplate having their own children, they recognize there's hardly anything around these days for their kids, and there's certainly nothing on TV. It's a generation, they're a generation, and they're raising another generation that will have less contact with TV than they do.
Yeah, in fact, it's not clear that you would even do a show like Reading Rainbow on television anymore. There's so many other media types that would be better suited for it.
Absolutely right.
Now, tell me what brings you here, because this brings us up to the present then, I guess. So here we are, Reading Rainbow, you're no longer doing that.
Right.
Star Trek is now part of your past.
Right.
Still very active, of course, in acting on television and stage and film. But you're interested in the game business. You're here with us at the Casual Connect.
Yeah. Well, you know what, I really recognize that game mechanics are a pretty awesome delivery system. If you want to engage an audience. Yeah. I've learned that through, you know, gaming with my daughter, and it's like, I used to be a smoker. Cigarettes are the perfect delivery system for nicotine into the human animal, okay? It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. You draw it into your mouth, it filters through your lungs, breaks the blood-brain barrier, and you get your hit like, boom, right now. Game mechanics are like crack to kids. Seriously. And for human beings in general, I'm guilty myself. I mean, I can lose myself for hours in gameplay. I'll sit there and I've got to pee and I won't move because I've just got to finish this level. And so what I have decided to commit myself to is, you know, some of the work that I've, you know, been doing for the last 30 years. It is no secret that we have a woefully undereducated population in America, and that we are in trouble. We have to do a better job of educating our kids. We are losing our traction on the world stage in terms of being able to contribute from the leadership position in the areas of science and technology. You can't have an educated population without having a literate population. You can't have a literate population if you don't have a young population that is connected to the written word and loves to read. So we want to use these game mechanics to do what we did on television for 25 years and steer children in the direction of books.
Right on. So how many developers in the audience think that games can help people learn to love the written word?
Right?
Right on.
Right?
You know, it wasn't so long ago. It wasn't so long ago that parents used to fret about their kids and electronic media because they were worried that kids weren't learning how to write.
Yeah.
And now you look at people using Twitter and people using email and using IM and using all these different things. We're writing more than we ever wrote. In fact, we're writing so much. There's this kind of blossoming information overload that's occurring right now. And so I think always every generation finds their way to navigate through whatever the media sphere is at the moment.
People felt the same about rock and roll, you know, when it first came out. And television as well, for that matter.
It was greatly derided, right?
That it was going to be the death of civilization.
Yeah, chewing gum for the eyes.
Right.
A vast wasteland, which it still is.
Well, I like to say about television, and I've expanded this saying now to include all mediums of entertainment. everything is educational. The question is, what are you teaching? Yeah. There's an inherent responsibility, I believe, in that which you produce, whether it's for television, movies, online, in the digital realm. You're going to be teaching something, and it's such a powerful tool for reaching people and helping. Look, Hollywood shapes the belief systems of people all over the planet.
That's right.
It's incredibly powerful, all pervasive. What are you teaching?
So you have a burden, right? You have a responsibility to
I don't
take
see it as a burden. I see it as an opportunity. I'm excited about being able to change the world.
Cool.
You know, it makes sense to me to use this technology for the good and for the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Just makes sense.
You know, there's a sort of a morality in your work. I don't know if it's fair to say that, but that's the way I see it. When I talk to you, when I listen to you, when I look at the things you've done, there's a moral component to LeVar Burton. And I'll bet a lot of people don't know what your original career plans were. But do you care to share that? Because I think that might be of interest to people here, too. Because it informs every decision you've made.
Sure, go ahead.
So, no, you tell us. So how did this play out?
Before I became an actor, I studied for the Catholic priesthood.
So you were in the seminary?
Yeah, I was in the seminary.
Wow.
Yeah, Father Kunta. They would have called me. I was raised a Catholic, and I really thought I did have the calling. I mean, I entered the Catholic seminary at the age of 13, really with an intention, to become a priest.
I bring this up because I think that as a storyteller, if you've certainly a storyteller at the scale that you're at, where you get to reach millions of people who are really going to listen to what you say, and there are certainly people here whose games now reach millions. Sometimes tens of millions of simultaneous users, you have some measure of responsibility, and as a storyteller, you want to bear that in mind, right? A good storyteller always thinks about his audience. He's always very cognizant of how are they listening, and he reads the audience and pays attention to the audience. But he's there to lead them, and he can lead them up or he can lead them down.
Right.
So there's this trend going on right now in the game industry, which is a little controversial. Some refer to it as gamification, which is a very ugly word, I think. And the concept can be considered
It's one of those words
ugly.
that tends to, it's a buzzword that tends to be overused, and then it gets picked up by people who have no idea what it means, but they use it anyway.
Well, and what tends to happen is, at least when it's applied commercially, in a commercial context, that you strip out the marrow out of what used to be a great game, and then you kind of apply it to a merchandising mechanism or something that's there to drive people toward commerce. In my view, this is an abdication of that moral responsibility, right? Because now you're taking something that could lead somebody to a great epiphany, because great games do that, right? They put you in the movie as a protagonist.
Right.
You strip that out and apply it to getting somebody to just go buy 3 DVDs in a store or something. I think you've taken them down a step, not lifted them. You haven't elevated them up a step. And what's your take? Have you started to see this kind of creeping gamification happening in the periphery? You know, do you have a Vons card that you use in the grocery store in Los Angeles?
You know what? I belong to a couple of clubs. I actually do have a supermarket card. You know, it's the only one that I have on my keychain because we got to eat. When I look at how the game industry is evolving, it reminds me so much of television in many respects. There is a huge movement, as you say, in gaming these days to capitalize on people's spending power. Television in its earliest days was, and the founding fathers of television saw it as an opportunity to really bring culture to America, to the masses. Once the price point of televisions got to the place where everybody could afford one, there was a real opportunity to educate people, to bring arts and culture into the home. But advertising became number one on the agenda. And so, 60 years later, we have an industry that's imploding because they no longer have the ability to capture the attention of Americans because there's so many other options for how to spend your time. And I think that the gaming industry faces a similar crisis. They're at a decision point. Certainly a decision point. What are you going to do with the power that you wield? Are you going to just try to sell stuff to folks? Or are you going to try and bring a little something additional to the table? I see there's nothing wrong with striving to empower, educate, enlighten. If we do our jobs right, we really can harness this all-powerful medium and literally change the world in the blink of an eye.
Right on. Here's to that. I'd certainly like to encourage anyone who'd like to ask a question of LeVar to step forward, because this isn't meant to be just a one-way or two-way dialogue.
I'd love to take
welcome your questions.
Some questions.
And, oh, here we
There you go. Hi there.
Hi.
What's your name?
My name is Ronnie.
Ronnie, hi.
Hi. I want to know, I know you were talking about reading Rainbow and the power of the written word and your mother being the English teacher and you having contact with books one way or the other, and how you see that games can be a way to pull the newer generation back into the written word. However, what's interesting is it seems like our attention spans as a society, especially with the younger and younger generations, is actually decreasing. And people pick up a game or they pick up something, they want to play it for a minute and then they're on to the next thing. But however, a book or the written word takes some time to get into. You have to, spend some time reading. You have to kind of settle into it. And it seems like even the physical book itself, people say that that's going to be obsolete and people are going to just be e-readers and whatever, and that's a totally different feeling from just picking up a book and cozying down with it. So how do you speak to those shifts, and how do we pull people back into a physical, intellectual relationship with reading?
It's a great question, Ronnie. I mean, I think I disagree with you a bit in terms of our interaction with technology causing us to be more fractured with our attention. I don't know, I mean, you ever sat and observed somebody playing Angry Birds? I mean, it's not like they play that for a minute and then move on to something else, you tend to be really captivated and focused, and I think that's the power of gaming. That's the power of game mechanics, is having the attention. And then again, what we put our focus on once we have the attention is what the conversation is all about. I think that the most successful games are about story, right? No matter how large or how small. People don't think that Angry Birds has a story, but I think it does, That very first screen shows you, here are the birds, there's the empty nest, there are the pig tracks walking away. Now you know why the birds are pissed. It's not a big story, but it's a story, right? It is a story. It's what we respond to as human beings. Again, we're hardwired to respond to moving pictures and sound. Stories in our DNA. We've been sharing stories since the caveman around the fire, even before there was fire. We were trying to tell each other stories, and it is our stories, it's those myths that inform us about who we are. We will never lose contact with storytelling, and we will never lose contact with the book. Do you know why? Because the book is the perfect delivery system for storytelling.
Hi, over here. This one, that guy. Hi.
Hey.
I want to thank you for coming here, obviously, but also on a personal level, I tutor for free at a center here in Seattle called 826 Seattle, It's part of a network at 826 centers. There's one in San Francisco, Brooklyn, etc. And my job is sometimes to trick kids into caring about both reading and writing. I tell them I'm a video game critic. They get excited. I say, well, let's do some game stuff that ties into a story. But I know with games, it's a lot of pressing A to skip the words. There's a lot of that happens. Kids, when they grab a game, are very interested in immediately the action. So from your perspective, how do you overcome that challenge and get a kid to take a game experience and get something literary out of it?
That's a great question. It's a beautiful point. I think that in those games where story is thought of as a secondary layer, you get kids skipping through the story. You have to integrate story. See, again, it's about what you're trying to communicate. The way you communicate your message is as essential as what it is you're trying to say. And my experience is that when those kids speed through the story, it's because the story is not an integrated layer. It's a layer on top. It's almost an afterthought. Well, we've got to move the plot along, so it's like a bad piece of exposition that a character will deliver in a B movie. I'm moving the bottle of water across the table because it's really important that I move the bottle of water. If it's clunky and non-integrated, the story won't be inspiring, and if it's not inspiring, then the visuals, the light and the sound will take over. Make sense? That's the wonderful thing about what it is y'all do, is you get to make that decision. How do I bring something to the table with my game, right? How do I capitalize on the fun that I am trying to build into this experience and give them a little something else? I mean, it doesn't have to be big, but it does have to have meaning. At least in my view. There's an opportunity there, is what I'm saying. And there are a million, I mean, the ways that you can incorporate that educational layer, that educational component, are as varied as the number of individuals, making these experiences.
The question causes me to think of, back to gamification, where so much of what we know of as gamification, the way it's actually expressed, is keeping score and getting points and earning badges, which is about as trivial a game concept as you can possibly imagine. And the analogy I would make to education is that's kind of like No Child Left Behind.
Right.
Right? Where it's forget about teaching them anything that they're going to actually use in life.
Right.
Let's just make sure they pass the test so that our school doesn't lose its funding. So we start teaching to the test.
Right.
And in a way, that's the gamification of the education system, is we're just going to teach the test and thereby shunt these kids on along through the system to the next class and so forth.
But what we've discovered very recently is that there have been a lot of schools that have been falsifying those tests.
Yeah.
And that the teaching of the test doesn't work. Yeah. So they've had to go through other nefarious methods to hold on to those test scores and the funding.
It's like a house of cards.
It's a house of cards, man. Right. It is a house of cards.
Where sometimes just the experience of getting somebody excited about reading is enough. Yeah. You've given them a gift that's going to last forever, right? And then they'll go find the educational benefit. All you need to do is set them on that path. It doesn't have to actually be that you can measure some outcome necessarily. That's a very quantified look at the outcome of education. I think it's a reflection of our time, perhaps. But it's a very narrow definition of education.
You've heard that saying, teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a day. Right. Or give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life.
If you can inspire people to explore on their own, then you've done your job.
Right.
Other questions? There's one there.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a game developer.
Where are you, Dan? Oh, there you are. Gotcha.
So I'm interested in your call to have games that are genuinely educational. I think that this audience will absolutely agree that games educate all the time. Will Wright has spoken compellingly on that subject. And there certainly is a link between games and text. You're in a small clearing in a forest and so on. But the problem is that when we make games for commercial market and commercial purposes, we optimize for that. Will Wright has also observed that he took any possible, well, not possible, but SimCity could have been a great lesson in linear programming, but it was just about selling units. So we're here to sell units. There's another conference for Games for Health, and there's other conferences for Games for Social Change, but these aren't funded very much except by grants. So the problem is, if we're all here to make commercial success, we absolutely agree with you that games can and should get kids loving the written word. But we're not going to work on that until some sort of funding source or other motivation arise. So for a lefty like Robert, I will quote Lenin, what is to be done?
I'm certainly not suggesting that everybody work on games that encourage engagement with the written word. That's just my business model. And I hear you that that the funding isn't readily available for the kinds of games that I'm interested in. What is to be done is your question. Look, I am a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist. I don't believe that making a living is mutually exclusive to doing well in the world. In fact, part of my belief system says that it is important to do well by doing good with your efforts, with your work, with what you do, what you contribute. See, because I believe that everybody's here to contribute something. We all have a unique gift. And kids, I speak a lot to children, and I tend to deliver a couple of messages. One, you are absolutely unique, and you have a gift to give. And that gift is probably related to what you are passionate about, what you love to do. So your job as a human being is to discover that thing that you love to do. For a lot of you, it's obvious. You are designers, and you have a skill. That which you tend to get lost in when time ceases to exist is a fairly good indication of where your passion lies. Having then discovered that, I tell kids that it's important to have the courage to share that gift with other people. I also tell kids that human beings tend to communicate in really 3 ways: through the thoughts we think, the words we speak, and the actions that we take. And I always ask them, of speaking and thinking and doing, what do you think is the most powerful? What has the most impact on the world? And the kids will invariably say, well, actions. You pick up a bottle of water, you put it down, that's an action that has power, you can see its impact. And I say, yeah, you're right. Other kids will say, well, it's words, sticks and stones actually don't break bones, but they do hurt. Words can be very powerful. Martin Luther King was a very powerful speaker. He could motivate people to action. And they're right as well. But I share with them that it is the thoughts we think that are actually the most powerful way we communicate with our world. There is nothing that I can think of that did not first begin with a thought. I'm a firm believer in the fact that there was some kid who watched those original episodes of Star Trek on television, became a designer of product, an engineer, and has contributed a technology that is more prevalent than the toaster. That kid was probably influenced by all of those scenes of Captain Kirk reaching to that secret Velcroed place on his hip, because there are no pockets in the 24th century, pulling out his communicator, flipping it open, and calling Scotty. By a show of hands, how many people have either used or seen someone use a flip cell phone? That which we focus our attention on, that which we focus our attention on, is what we tend to manifest. So I tell kids, be very careful of what you're thinking, because it's your thoughts that really have the most power. So what to do? Be mindful of your thinking. And that kind of thinking that creates a shift is exactly what, what I believe is necessary. Yeah? Kind of a long answer.
Yeah, that's a good answer, though. Thoughtful.
Hello, okay, back here. Hi, my name is, all the way over here. Hi, my name is Cortana, and I just first of all want to thank you for being an inspiration to me with reading Rainbow and with Star Trek.
Right on.
But you mentioned Halo, and I remember you tweeting about a Halo book or sometime. Now, steering us back to tying literature to games, which one of all the Halo books, because they've put out a lot, is your favorite and why?
Wow.
Wow.
Have you read any Halo books?
No.
I haven't either.
No,
Sorry.
I haven't read any Halo
super
books.
Halo fan. Which
Yeah.
one's your favorite?
Yeah.
Why do you like it, and should we read it? Oh, that's cool.
So the reading of the books actually enhances your enjoyment of the game? Cool.
Which came first? You playing the game and then the book? Of course, right? Cool. There you go, gamers. Write your books.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Next question.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask something really personal to me, but in celebration of all the episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation coming out on Netflix, my fiance and his best friends have decided to watch every episode in order and then blog about each episode.
Good.
So they are deciding the name of their blog, and I wanted to get your feedback. The current contenders for the title of this blog are Earl Grey Hot, and there are 4 lights. And I wanted to see if you could weigh in or perhaps suggest a name of your own.
Guys who have way too much time on their hands? It's the first thing that came to mind.
There's a question back there.
Next question would be, Mr. Burton, you've got Geordi as this film and science fiction icon. Have you seen in games a character that has had either an African American impact or a physically challenged impact in the game community that's an icon similar to the one you portrayed in television and film?
Wow, that's a great question. No, not yet. And I'm not saying that there aren't any, but I don't believe in this now moment that I can come up with one that I have encountered. So, a lot of opportunity right there. Get busy. Right? Right.
Hi, my name is John.
Hey, John.
And I wanted to actually hear either a short Star Trek story, maybe something from when you were on the show, or maybe how you got along with Mr. Data in real life, something like that.
John?
Yes.
Mr. Data is a fictional character. Brent, I get along with really well. We're a pretty close family, the cast members. We see each other whenever possible. We make sure that we see each other at least twice a year, Christmas and 4th of July. If we don't get a chance to gather all of us together, whoever's here on this side of the pond, we make sure that we see each other at least those 2 times a year. When I got married many years ago, my best man was Brent Spiner, and my groomsmen were Michael Dorn, Jonathan Frakes, and Patrick Stewart.
Cool. Let me give a couple of housekeeping announcements. LeVar is very happy to meet with folks, but we prefer not to do it after this session, but instead tomorrow there's actually going to be a little shindig, a little get-together. It's the
Mina Mingle that Trans Gaming is hosting. Anybody coming to the Trans Gaming event here tomorrow at 5:30?
So a little cocktail event at 5:30 tomorrow. You can meet LeVar, get an autograph, and say hi. Tomorrow morning at 9:30, I'll be opening up the Games Everywhere track here in this Taper auditorium. I'll be doing a 1-hour talk followed by a panel discussion, and topics like gamification and mythology will come back in those two presentations. So I hope you'll join us for that.
That means one less cocktail tonight, so you can be here tomorrow morning for Robert at 9:30.
That's right. Cool. So we can certainly take questions if there are more. There are.
All right. Up here. Over here.
Hey.
Do you want me to stand up?
Yeah, that would be great. That
Okay.
way we can identify you. Oh, there you are.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kalen.
Hey, Kalen.
It's a man's name.
You keep telling folks that, man.
So my question is, reflecting on the message that you just said about about using games to turn children back toward the written word.
Or anything. Use game mechanics to turn children on to the idea that they can change the world. Use game mechanics to turn children on to the idea that they have a unique gift to contribute. Use game mechanics to turn children on to the idea that they really need to pay attention to what they're putting in their bodies, because, you know, what you eat is what you are. It's not just about the written word. That is certainly really important to me, and it's something that I'm excited about using game mechanics to do. But there's so many things to say and do and promote that have pro-social value that don't have to be the reason you're doing the game. But it certainly would be nice if you were able to just put a layer in your story that brings something else to the table, is what I'm saying. I'm sorry if I gave the impression that my expectation is that you'll go and you know, do games about literacy and.
Well, no, that's not it completely.
Okay.
Basically what I was saying is, you know, just factoring in, you know, what you said about that. I was reflecting on the message, and I was asking, what would you as a gamer want to see, like, on the TV screen when you're talking about this game? Because obviously my idea of using games to promote certain other things is going to be fundamentally different than yours. So since it's your central idea, what would you like to see?
Do you want me to reveal my business model here in this room?
I would like a chart, please.
I could have that offline conversation with you, but I'm really not here to make any announcements about what I'm up to. But you can believe I'm up to something.
So, next question, if there is another. There we have it, over on that side.
Hi. Personal question for you, I guess. What do you like to play? And if you've thought about it, why do you like to play that game or that type of game?
I like first-person shooters because I'm just that guy, you know. Why do I like first-person shooters? There's something that happens with my brain chemistry, man, that gets me excited. I get focused. I really feel like I'm having an experience that is intense, satisfying, and rewarding. I've never really thought about it that deeply. I just like to shoot shit.
All right, great. I think we got it then. Is there more?
Yeah.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah. All over the place. Who's got the microphone?
Yeah, you guys got it.
I have a microphone.
There you go. Then ask your question, please.
I remember reading something, it might have been at least a year ago, about an interactive storybook company you were working with called RR Kids. Was that vicious internet rumor, or is that still ongoing?
You don't believe everything you read on the internet, do you?
Most things.
Okay. It's all good.
So that's no comment? I'll sit down now.
No, I'm really just playing with you. RR Kids is what is the name of the company that that I am building. Yes, that is true.
So I'm not actually 100% sure you were specifically on it, but Gargoyles was pretty awesome. And I was curious if you had any amusing anecdotes about how the entire cast ended up doing that show.
I was the one member of the cast that didn't do episodes of Gargoyles, the cartoon show. Although I did do every episode of a cartoon show called Captain Planet. Any Captain Planet fans in the house?
Right
Yeah?
on.
It was announced today that Captain Planet is going to be made into a feature-length motion picture, which I think is really bizarre. But kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
kind of cool. Yeah. Let all powers combine. Earth! Little Captain Planet
You've got a lot
humor
of
for
voice
you.
work. You've worked in just about every
Yeah,
single
no,
medium.
no.
It's amazing.
I
forgot about the animation part.
Yeah.
That's a big chunk.
Yeah, and
And
it's
you were
again,
also on Family Guy, right?
Yeah, it's all storytelling, you know,
Yeah.
and that's what I absolutely love. I love sharing stories.
So would you do the voice for a game if somebody was interested in that?
I'm waiting for someone to ask.
Right on.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Last question?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Ayu, and it's really cool to hear you talk about education and interactive media coming together because I currently work for Dreambox Learning, and our focus is on math education currently and really getting kids to learn math and engage with them and, you know, get them really into the math curriculum. So it's really nice to hear that, you know, people are starting to finally realize that using game mechanics to educate children is really coming to the forefront, especially at this year's Casual Connect. So I just wanted to say that it's really nice to hear you affirm, you know, sort of what most of us have been feeling for several years now, or for a long time, actually.
Awesome. Amen. How many people were here for the Leapfrog presentation? Did you see the numbers about the growth, the potential growth in this industry? The amount of disposable income parents in this country are willing to spend on their children's education is astounding.
So take that, whoever it was that asked about the business model for education.
Astounding. Leapfrog demonstrates that there's a huge market out there that is really only being tapped at the tip of the iceberg. So I certainly see that as an opportunity that needs to be taken advantage of, and I hope you do too.
Well, folks, give a big, big round of applause.